Well, Spartans, this is Coach Johnson for our last, I guess, our last final, whatever you want to say, podcast before our next test. This is over cosecant and secant, following our sine, cosine, tangent, and cotangent lessons that we've been talking about. And I know that there have not been any funny videos on the website as of late, but I did post one below that if you want to take a look at would be, I thought it was pretty funny. If you want to check it out, that'd be great. And I did that for your enjoyment. But again, wanted to make sure I put this as small as possible so that you kind of got the idea of what was supposed to be going on. But at the same time, if you had questions, bring them in tomorrow morning for sure. All right, let's get started. First of all, we have to remember what cosecant and secant are. Remember, those are the reciprocal functions of our sine and cosine. So remember, when I have sine, anytime I have sine, I always have something that goes with it, or the reciprocal, or 1 over sine. Okay? Remember, 1 over sine and sine, we label that as cosecant. Okay? So cosecant and sine go together. Remember, we have cosine, again, reciprocal, 1 over cosine. And that is linked to secant. So anytime we have cosecant and secant, those two are linked with sine and cosine. Now, I'll tell you this right now, you're going to really like what we're going to about ready to do, because most of the stuff that we've done, you already know how to do. For instance, let's get started with numbers 1 and 2, and then after that, I'll be done. First of all, we label our A. First step, let's label our A. Well, what's our amplitude? We know that that is equal to 3. Okay? Pretty easy. Our next step we've got to do is determine what our period is. Well, again, our period is exactly what we did with sine and cosine, which is 2 pi over b. Well, 2 pi over b is the same as 2 pi over 2 in this case, or we set it equal to pi. Now, our next part is doing our phase shift. Well, we know that that is c over b, and because c is equal to 0, because there is no c, okay, we know that it's 0 over 2, or the same thing as 0. There is no phase shift, okay? So since there's no phase shift, the important parts to note so far are the fact that we have the period of pi and our amplitude of 3. So now what we're going to do is we've got to first figure out now, what is cosecant linked to? Well, we know cosecant's linked to sine. So because it's linked to sine, guess what? We're going to graph it as if it's a sine function. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come down. We note that since there's no phase shift, we start at 0. And we know our period is at pi, so we know, let's give ourselves some room here. Let's make pi all the way out here. Obviously in the middle would be pi over 2. And let's go do the same thing on this other side. So negative pi over 2 and pi, or negative pi. Again, your graph may look differently, but just for right now, let's make sure we'll just keep it consistent there. And again, we have our amplitude to go up and down 3, and we'll label that accordingly. So now, again, just like we did previously, we have a starting point, which is at 0, and our ending point is our period at pi. So we know that we've got to go up, down, and back up again in the matter of our period, or pi. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, we know the middle point between it is pi over 2, so it's got to cross because we know it's sine. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come up, touch, come back down, touch right in the middle, and then come back up again. Okay, and then I'm just going to continue that all the way throughout. Again, I'll repeat this on the other side as well. Okay, repeat on the other side. So again, that's how we figure out how to graph our sine, but we still have not found what our cosecant is. Well, here's a quick thing for you. Our cosecant, wherever the sine graph crosses the x-axis, that is going to be an asymptote. So we're going to create one there. Wherever it crosses the x-axis, we're going to create one there. And we'll create one there as well. Okay? Now, in order to figure out what the graph looks like, wherever it crosses the x-axis, we know is an asymptote, and wherever it touches our amplitude at that point, I'm going to put a little dot at each of those. And what's going to happen, I'll do this in blue just so you can see. What's going to happen is at the asymptotes and at that point, it's going to create almost like a parabola, like a U. So it should look like this. So I've got there. I've got there. Again, stay in your asymptotes. You cannot cross it. There, 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 and there. Okay, so as you can see, everything that's in blue is what our cosecant graph would look like. We graph it the same as sine, except this time, wherever it crosses the x-axis, we create asymptotes. Wherever it contacts the amplitude, that's our starting point for our parabola going in the opposite direction. Okay, so again, very key points there that that you need to know. Remember, if I was given secant, and again, here's the notes if you need to write those down. If I was given secant, I do the same exact thing. I find the amplitude, I find what is my period, what is my phase shift, and then after that, I do the same exact thing, except wherever it crosses the x-axis, create a dotted line, our asymptote, and then obviously where it touches the amplitude, that's where it creates that parabola there. Okay. So again, remember it's cosecant. If I was doing this example quickly, a is equal to 1, so I go up and down 1. Our period is 2 pi over b, so in this case it should be 2. So 2 should be our period. All right, our phase shift is c over b. In this case it's pi over pi, or our phase shift should be 1. So in this case, since it's positive, we're going to go to the left one. So I'm going to put left 1, so here's negative 1. We'll say this is negative 2. We'll say this is 1, and we'll say this is 2. And again, it could be different. So we'll start at negative 1, because it's going to go to the left. And we're going to go 2 to the right, because that's our period. So we go 1 and 2. Obviously, when I do that, my ending point is at 1. My middle point is at 0. So again, it's got to go up, down, and back up again within negative 1 to 1, because that was our starting point. This is our ending point. So when I do that, remember, normally with sine, I cross between my max and min, but with cosine, I start at the very top unless it's a negative, which in that case I would start at the bottom. And I know at my ending point I've got to do the same thing, but in between, it's going to be down. And in the middle, that's where it crosses the x-axis. So it should look like this. Come down, touch, come up, touch, and then I just repeat that over and over again. Okay? Now remember, where it crosses the x-axis, that is where I create my asymptote. There you go. And finally, when I finish, wherever I touch my amplitude, I create a parabolas going in the opposite direction, being careful not to cross over the asymptote, but to stay inside on both sides there. Anyway, I hope that was helpful for you. I hope you have a great day. And again, if you have any other questions, bring them to class. But I think a lot of these are going to be easy for y'all to take down. Anyway, have a great day. See y'all tomorrow.